Hello, hello. You know what time it is. Get into it. Get into it. Yes. I'm gonna move up a little bit closer. In the words of one of my favorite YouTubers, Jamie French, she was doing a video one time. She's like, "Oh my gosh, I've been sitting back here this whole time like a hooligan with no job." So I'm moving up a little closer. Thank you for all the compliments. Shout out to my stylist, Kafisala. And, you know, I really do appreciate it because my journey with my dreadlocks, and yes, I call them that. I understand that others may have their own pretensions as to why they would not like to be called that. I refer to them as locks, dreadlocks, twists. I'm my own person. I can't speak to anybody else as how they would like to be addressed when it comes to that, but there's nothing dreadful about my hair. It is a beautiful expression of my blackness as well as my connection in a way to my African roots. So, yeah, take that however you will. But I look fabulous if I do say so myself. Alright. We are back with the Redwall series. And tonight is going to be a little bit longer than what we originally had taken upon. Because I'm telling you, we're going to get this book done before Christmas. Way before Christmas, because I want to read Peter Pan. But thank you for those who are watching. Like I said, you do not have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them when you have time on your own, which I do not. All the music that is playing in the background, which comes from one of my favorite ballets, which I hope I get to see live one day. And if you know this ballet, you know what I'm talking about. This is Holiday Music. Is a YouTuber that does a lot of really cool classical music playlists that give me a lot of life. Like, they all have interesting titles. Like, this is Dark Royalty Core Classical Music. And then there's stuff like Dark Academia, Heavy and Fast, Classical Baroque, Dark Academia, Classical Music, Light Academia, Classical Music for Reading. So, yeah, cool stuff. Very cool stuff, actually. So, I hope everybody is getting tucked in and settled in for some good reading, because we're about to get into it. Chapter 4. Matthias set up a solitary makeshift camp that night. After a frugal meal, he wrapped his habit tight about his body to ward off the chill breeze and settled down to sleep, alone with his bitter thoughts about the ungrateful Shrews. The young mouse finally dozed off. Which, by the way, frugal is one of my favorite words. And it describes Libras very well. Frugal, when someone calls you frugal, it means that you are someone who you don't need expensive baubles and trinkets. You shop smart. You're very, like, you're a person who is not one to easily spend money, or someone who does not foolishly do so. And if you do spend it, it is to do so in a very efficient and very concise manner. Frugality. Which, I have a dictionary for that. Hold on one sec. Because I want to give the kids a proper definition. That's why it's always good, children, to have a thesaurus and a dictionary in your household, regardless of the fact that we have the internet. So yeah, frugality is thrifty. Someone who is, like, cheap, but, like, good with their money. Like, they don't just spend to spend. And this is amazing. Let's continue. Sometime before dawn, he became aware of movement and sound nearby. Carefully, Matthias slitted one eyelid open. His feet were warm. He felt the extra weight of a blanket that had been draped over him while he was asleep. The guerrilla union of Shrews and Mossflower had returned. Small campfires had been lighted, and breakfast was being prepared. Matthias decided that it must be nearly daybreak. Turning on his side, he kept up the pretense of sleep. Ignoring the presence of the Shrews, he drifted back into a warm slumber. It was fully daylight when he reawakened. The sun beat down through the trees, mixing its rays in the pale blue smoke of the cooking fires. Log-a-Log brought toasted wheat cake and a bowl of herb tea. Sitting up, Matthias accepted them non-committally. He ate and drank in silence while Log-a-Log folded the blanket and packed it away. The shrew stood beside him and gave him a short, nervous cough. Matthias, I'm sorry about what happened yesterday. As you can see, we've decided by majority vote to come along with you. The young mouse continued to ignore him. Log-a-Log slumped down.
Matthias, listen. We Shrews of the Union try to run our lives along democratic lines. You must not think too harshly of us. The shrew who spoke out against accompanying you was only stating chapter and verse of the act. I was wrong to hit him. Gaussum did right to uphold his argument.
Matthias arose and shouldered his bundle. Look, Log-a-Log, don't talk to me about your silly rules. Subsection 3, paragraph 4 and all that nonsense. You're either with me or against me, and I haven't got a valuable time to waste or a lot of shrew union rules and disputes. Log-a-Log picked up his pack and smiled broadly at the young mouse. Matthias, my friend, we are with you to a shrew. Tooth, claw, nail. Lead on, bold warrior. Matthias laughed in open relief. Well, let's get started, friend Log-a-Log. We've got an arrow to fight and a sword to win. Surrounded by a band of shrews that had started quarreling over the best route to the quarry, Matthias marched stoically forward. They trekked through the trees, leaving mossflower wood far behind across open ground, giving the farmhouse a carefully wide berth, birching hawthorn hedges and spanning dried-out ditches through several fields that lay fallow in the summer stillness. A halt was called at lunchtime at the banks of a slow, broad river. Matthias sat next to Gaussum during the midday meal. It would be the last cooked food they would get. Stealth and secrecy would be the order of the day. Upon the other side of the river, no fires, no noise. Matthias flicked a pebble into the water. How are we supposed to cross this lot? He asked. Gaussum spoke through a mouthful of bread.
Log-a-Log, how else? That's how he got his name, you know. His father and the whole family were all fairy shrews on this river. If you needed to cross the water, you stood on the bank and shouted, Log-a-Log! Here, let's see if it still works.
Gaussum walked the water's edge, cupping her paws around her mouth. She called in an undulating voice, Log-a-log-a-log-a-log-a-log-a-log! The older shrew appeared out of a reed bed, balanced upon a large floating tree trunk, which he prepared skillfully with a long pole into the side of the bank. Angrily, he sprang ashore, upbraiding Gaussum. Puddin'-headed shrew! Do you have to broadcast the fact we're here? Shouting like a great foghorn. We'd better strike cap and get across now before someone comes.
I was only showing Matthias how to call for the fairy shrew.
Gaussum muttered surly. Is that all? Said Log-a-Log heatedly. Then why don't you show him the snack tracks in the mud there? Or didn't you notice them? Asmodeus passed here not 4 hours ago. It's probably gone hunting in Mossflower Wood. It's a mercy we didn't bump into him. We might come back this way before the day is through. Matthias stared in horrified fascination at the broad, slimy path that had been left in the mud by the snake. The shrews had all clambered hastily aboard the strange craft. Hurry along, Matthias! All hands on deck! Log-a-Log hissed. Despite the danger of the enterprise, the young mouse actually enjoyed the ride across the river on the tree trunk. Several of the shrews dug lines out of their packs and fished skillfully, amassing quite a tiny little catch before the ferry nosed into the opposite bank with a gentle bump. The shrews disembarked, and Matthias helped Log-a-Log to conceal the ferry in some bulrushes, which are a form of water reeds. I was thinking, Matthias mused, do you suppose we could all hide somewhere? That way we might see Asmodeus return and track him to his lair. That's exactly what I had planned myself, the shrew replied. If we spread out along the bank and remain hidden, then we'll stand a good chance of spotting poison teeth. It's a good idea, but I can see a drawback. Supposing the adder catches the scent of shrews, there's so many of us that it's a distinct danger. Then again, Matthias argued, would it be better if we made our way to the quarry and waited there? Asmodeus is bound to head for home. I wish it were that simple, my friend, Log replied. The land around the quarry offers no concealment. Too flat and bare. Poison Teeth is full of ancient cunning, too. He may have a secret entrance outside the quarry itself. I think it's best we wait here. I'll spread the comrades out in a line. We'll all keep watch. Throughout the long afternoon, Matthias lay hidden at the base of a lilac bush. He was within calling distance of Shrews, secreted a short distance away, as they were of the neighbors further along. Fully a half-mile of the bank were covered in this fashion. Whoever spotted Asmodeus was to report after letting 1 minute elapse to Matthias, who was positioned roughly at the center of the line. Galsum and Log were stationed on either flank. The blazing sun hung over the watchers like a fiery disk. Matthias kept his sights on the river and the ground in front of him, not daring to move, whether to eat, drink, or scratch. He was forced to endure the unwelcome attention of inquisitive flies and insects that buzzed about and walked across him at their leisure. Often he would focus so hard that his imagination played tricks. A slight ripple upon the water or a vagrant breeze through the grass became Asmodeus. He would blink and reassure himself that it was only a product of his tensed mind. The young mouse lost sight of time until he became aware of the sun starting to sink and a reddening sky, heralding the twilight. Surely the snake must pass this way soon. As complete darkness descended, a shrew sneaked up through the grass and tapped Matthias' shoulder.
"What's the matter? Has Asmodeus been sighted?"
Matthias asked. The shrew pointed out the flank that Galsum headed.
"I don't know, Mouse. You'd better come and see for yourself. I'll go and get Log.
Matthias scrambled out from beneath the lilac. Something must have gone wrong. Throwing caution to the winds, he dashed along the riverbank. Other shrews left their hiding places and followed him. Galsum was seated upon this open ground, her eyes wide with fright, teeth chattering madly, her whole body trembling like a leaf. Log came racing up. Matthias shouted to him,
"Galsum's in a state of shock! Help me, let's get her into the water!"
Grabbing Galsum between them, they rushed her into the shallow and ducked her under the surface of the water. She came up spluttering but coherent.
"A giant poison teeth! The snake! Asmodeus, he was here! I didn't spot him until it was too late! He's taken Mingo! Gave him the magic eyes, then bit him and dragged him off! Poor Mingo! Oh, it was horrible! Horrible! I'll tell you, that rotten, filthy reptile!"
Galsum flung herself down, sobbing into the grass. Log pulled her roughly to her feet. "Come on! Don't lie there crying, shrew! The adder probably left a good wet trail for us to follow. Where did it happen?" Galsum ran shakily some distance to the left. She pointed to the ground.
"Right here! You can see the great slithering marks! Oh, look!"
The evidence was quite clear. The wet path and the dry grass gleamed in the dark. They followed the trail with Matthias and Log in the lead. It twisted and turned tortuously over small hillocks, throughout hedges and cross fields. Even when the wetness stopped, there was the musty odor of death clinging to the ground. At the top of a small rise, Matthias dropped into a crouch, signaling everyone to do likewise. He pointed downwards.
"Look, Log, there!"
Spread out beneath them was a vast, disused quarry. It was as if some gigantic hand had scooped a great hole into the landscape. The shape was roughly oval. The steep red sandstone sides were terraced halfway around into long, flat shelves. Piles of fallen stone were dotted about amid the defunct workings. The scant vegetation lent the quarry an air of stark desolation. They lay on the edge of the pits, straining their eyes into the dark floor area below. Steadily, Log gave orders to the gorilla shrews to retire back across the field where they could rest up and eat a much-needed meal. Only he and Galsum remained at the edge of the quarry with Matthias, who settled any further debate by saying,
"I'm going down there for a look as soon as it's light."
"If you must go, then we will come with you," murmured Log. Matthias shook his head.
"No, I cannot allow it. It's far too dangerous."
Galsum, who was fully recovered, spoke out courageously.
"You cannot stop us, Matthias. You are not a Union member. Therefore, we are under your command. We are not under your command. The rules clearly state this, so the decision is out of your paws. We go! You and Log get some sleep. I'll take first sentry duty."
The three friends slept in turns, relieving one another through the long watches of the night hours. Matthias was on duty when the first figures of dawn probed the quarry. What a difference daylight made to the sinister nighttime appearance of the scene below. The sandstone ranged through a spectrum of pale sunlight gold, banded through every shade of yellow, fawn, umber, brown, down to the dusty red sandstone that must have been hewn out in distant ages to provide the masons with material to build Redwall Abbey, which I love that word, umber, or umbra. It's just, it's it's a good word. Hi, my friends. Thank you for watching. He roused his companions to view the awesome spectacle. To think that all this peaceful beauty should hide such cold evil, he breathed wonderingly. In silent Indian file they began the descent. The going was not too hard. There were lots of handholds and steps, and the sandy rock was quite firm, not at all slippery. It took less than an hour for the three friends to climb down. They stood together on the flat quarry floor, gazing around.
"Supposing Poison Teeth decides to hunt today?"
whispered Gaussum. "I have a feeling he won't," Logalong replied. "Asmodeus got a full day's hunting yesterday. The unexpected bonus of poor old Mingo was on his way home. He'll probably sleep through today and go out to hunt tonight." "So that gives us all day to find out where he is," added Matthias. "Shall we look together or split up?" Stick together," said Gaussum as she and Logalong drew their short rapiers. Matthias took out his dagger. They started searching the quarry for a possible hole or concealed entrance. The trio scoured the lower slopes, poking and probing. They inspected underneath studded bushes, turned over chunks of rock, crawled beneath huge slabs, always watching keenly for the telltale single winding track of the adder. Oh yes, this gentleman is jogging in the cold. My kudos to you, my friend. Please keep going. The silence was oppressive. There was neither birdsong nor the hum of insects inside the sunken area. Having crisscrossed the floor, they progressed to the middle terraces, but the results were equally disappointing. All morning they had searched the quarry without any success. At midday, Logalong called a halt. They sat on a flat table-shaped rock halfway up and shared a hardtack lunch, followed by a canteen of water. It was not a cheerful meal. They each sat with their own thoughts. Finally, Gaussum stood up, just dusting her fur off. She clapped her paws together in a brisk manner, urging her companions to resume the task.
"Righto, come on, you two. We've only got half a day left."
Matthias and Logalong gathered up their packs and weapons as Gaussum leaned on the side of a narrow slab and continued her summary.
"If we search around the top lip this afternoon, that only leaves us the..."
The echo of the cry hung upon the still air. Gaussum was gone. The narrow slab she had been leaning against swung loosely on a pivot. They had found the entrance of the lair of Asmodeus Poison Teeth. Chapter 5. Actually, I'm gonna make some more tea. Hold on. Also, let's talk about one thing really quickly. If y'all ever want to do something really cute and nice, I love Lorna Dunes. Okay, oh, this is upside down. Lorna Dunes, they're amazing. They're amazing shortbread cookies. But, in addition to these, I love Oreos, Lorna Dunes, ginger snaps, and gingerbread. I love gingerbread. Even outside of the holiday season. For me, it doesn't matter. I love it. Clooney the Scourge anxiously awaited the arrival of darkness. Over one of these three plans had reached fruition a lot earlier than he had expected. Kilconey had proved an invaluable help. He had been across to the woods to satisfy his curiosity about what the rats were doing there. It came as no surprise to the ferret to see a large siege tower under construction. However, there was a problem. The cart still lay upturned in the ditch. Try as they would, the rats had not been able to remove a set of wheels and an axle from it. Kilconey had a word with Clooney and was immediately sent down to supervise the operation. The garrulous ferret showed the rats that he possessed a sound knowledge of the principles of fulcrum and leverage. He rigged a block and a tackle to supplement a dead tree limb that they were using as a lever. Ignoring wheels and axles, he roped the cart to the block. With all the rats and a great deal of luck, he managed to lift the hay cart until it was halfway out the ditch. Further pressure on the lever sent the hay cart past its own point of balance. The block and tackle parted under the strain, sending the ferret and the rats on the level shooting down into the ditch. By mistake, it did the trick. With a crash, the cart landed upright in the road. They pushed it into the woods. Kilcony oversaw the lifting of the tower onto the bed of the cart. Delighted by his own ingenuity, he added the final touches. In a short time, the siege tower, its reels muffled with sacking, stood completed, ready for use. Clooney gathered his captains about him and outlined his strategy. Tonight, when it was dark, Fangbird would step up the attack on the gatehouse wall as a diversionary measure. Clooney would command a picked band of the best fighters. They would bring the siege tower from out of the cover of mossflower wood and wheel it to a part of the wall where the defense appeared weakest. Under cover of darkness, they would filter from the top of the tower onto the ramparts. A quick slaughter of the defenders would leave Redwall wide open to them. Clooney watched the evening sky anxiously. It would not be long now. He signaled Fangbird to begin the diversionary assault. Yelling and shouting fearsome war cries, the attackers leapt from the ditch, peppering the ramparts with a hail of arrows, spears, and stones. "Redwall to me! Come on, mice!" cried Constance. "Let us give better than we get! Redwall to me!" Basil Stackhare had formed 3 lines of bow mice on top of the wall. They worked with military efficiency as the hare rapped out orders. "First rank, fire! Drop back, kneel, and reload! Second rank, fire! Drop back, kneel, and reload! Third rank, fire! Drop back, kneel, and reload! First rank, forward again, fire!" The commands continued unabated. Enemy soldiers fell stricken on the roads. Darkclaw rushed about, bringing up reinforcements. "Keep those slings throwing! Bring up extra spears! Close up that line! Don't fire until you see them stand!" John Churchmouse, Mr. Vole, and Friar Hugo ran about bending low. They collected up all the arrows, spears, and stones hurled by the horde, issuing them to the defenders. "Come on, Otters! Give them back a taste of their own medicine!" Winifred urged her slingers on while directing fresh archers into the ranks of the bow mice. Constance and the beavers shared a stack of enemy spears. They returned them with frightening power and devastating aim. Ferret archers at the edge of the meadow found the range of Basil's bow mice. Several were felled before Jess and Winifred, along with some cracked otter slingers, sent down a barrage so swift and accurate that it decimated the ferrets within minutes. While the battle went on ahead, ranging from the heights of the parapet to the depths of the ditch, the Joseph bell rang out over the carnage. As my friends back at work call me, they call me a tea snob, because tea is life. Because I don't drink coffee. Yeah, one thing also about me, I don't drink coffee or energy drinks, y'all. This is just me. I don't even need to necessarily have like a full day's worth of sleep or like 8 hours of sleep to be functional. Like, once I'm up, I'm up. Until I'm no longer needed, and then I rest. Clooney snapped the battered visor down on his war helmet. He rapped Kilcony on his shoulder. "Good! Now's the time! Come on, ferret!" Together they slunk off down the ditch, running crouched over to the southeast corner of the wall, where it was relatively quiet. Keeping noise down to a minimum, Clooney ordered the troops to bring down forward the siege tower. Straining and pushing, the rat soldiers trundled the tall contraption from its woodland hiding place. The going was even harder across the short space of soft meadow ground. Clooney himself lent a claw, pulling on one of the laid ropes. He tugged mightily, causing the cumbersome tower to sway dangerously as it bumped over grassy hillocks. "Bring it up close to the wall," he whispered urgently. "That's it. Now make sure it's on an even keel. I don't want the top wobbling all over the place." Stones and soil were tamped around the wheels, wedging them still. The great tower stood ready for use. When Friar Hugo hurried off to join the defenders, he left Cornflower in charge of the kitchens. She had busied herself with setting pans of oatmeal and oven bread ready for the next morning's breakfast. Cornflower then thought of the sentries up on the wall, and she set about making a large pan of vegetable soup. It was a great favorite with the defenders at nighttime, especially when she had made it her own recipe. Helped by Mrs. Vole and Mr. Squirrel, she ladled it into 3 big earthenware jugs. Taking up a jug each with a small basket of fresh loaves and some goat cheese, they set off, with Cornflower in the lead carrying a lantern. The first stop was the southeast corner, where Formol and his crew had a monotonous task. Night and day they monitored the grounds for sounds of tunneling. They were glad of a short respite and some hot food while they chatted to the caterers in their gruff, polite tones. Cornflower was never quite sure of what Formol was saying, but she loved listening to his funny, countrified mole dialect.
Missy, they rattin' varmints be a-comin' up in 2 days, I reckon, gar. We give 'em a worry if they shows their eyes.
Cornflower was only picking up 1 word in 3, but by the fierce scowl on Formol's face, she was certain that the rats would not find it a pleasant experience being given "Oh, dairy." Formol tugged his nose graciously at her.
Thank ye kindly, not looking vegetable soup to keep 'em off on these moles.
Mr. Squirrel chuckled to Cornflower and Mrs. Vole. Well, I can take it to the moles are quite fond of homemade vegetable soup. I'll know my Jess will be ready for some.
Yes, and so would Sam if he weren't fast asleep in bed,
Cornflower replied.
Look, you and Mrs. Vole start serving along by the gatehouse. Keep your heads low and be careful. I'll stare it up here at the corner and see you back at the kitchen later.
I believe our water is ready for our tea. With the lantern and basket in one paw, and the jug in the other, Cornflower ascended the steps at the southeast corner of the wall. Brother Rufus assisted her up the ramparts. The young field mouse with the magic soup. Nice to see you, Cornflower. It gets lonely up this end where there's no action. Brother Rufus held out his mug. He watched gratefully through the cloud of steam that arose from the jug. That smells good. Vegetable soup, my favorite. Cornflower was not listening. She was staring open-mouthed across Brother Rufus's shoulder. The soup was overflowing from the mug and spattering on the stones as she continued to pour. Across the top of a parapet, a ramshackle wooden platform had appeared as if from nowhere. Perched on top of it, ready to spring, was a villainous-looking rat with a cutlass clenched between his teeth. Cornflower shrieked aloud. More by accident than design, Brother Rufus spun around and sent the scalding contents of his mug splashing full into the rat's eyes. With a piercing wail of agony, the rat fell from the top of the platform. Scarcely aware of what she was doing, Cornflower threw the lantern. It shattered on top of the siege tower, drenching the dead wood in lamp oil. Instantly, the flames licked hungrily over the platform, turning it into an inferno. Attracted by the flaring blaze that lit the night, defenders rushed from all quarters to see what was happening. Over 30 rats were in the high reaches of the burning tower. Many more were in the middle and still more in the lower frames. Rats were kicking and fighting each other to get down from the blazing tower. They bit and trampled and slashed. Some jumped while others were pushed, screaming as they fell to the field far below. Clooney ran about in a berserk rage, temporarily bereft of his senses. He seized holding of smoldering injured rats, some with their fur alight.
Get back up there, you cowards! Jump on the wall!
He screamed in his madness. The rats who had been attacking the gatehouse left off fighting and ran down the road to the fiery holocaust. Sparks crackled and shot off into the night sky. Clooney lashed out at all and sundry with his tail, foaming at the mouth and cursing wildly, his face a terrifying mask of insanity in the glare from the tower.
It's only a bit of fire! Get back up there, you blundering fools! Kill the mice!
Darkclaw and Fangburn grabbed hold of Clooney's smoldering cloak. They dragged him backwards. "Get out of the way, Chief! It's starting to fall!" With a roaring crackle and a snap of blazing timber, the siege tower leaned crazily to one side. It tottered, then collapsed in a flaring sheet of flame and sparks. The hay wagon listed drunkenly and was pulled over on its side, where it lay burning furiously. The instant put an end to that night's fighting. On top of the wall, cheering broke out. Cornflower was the heroine of the hour. She blushed as Formo nodded admiringly.
You un looking more handsome in this light, missy? You gotten any vegetable soup left? Didn't give it all to these varmints, did ye?"
Below the wall was a scene of mass carnage. The ground was littered with the bodies of attackers who had fallen prey to the flames in the ill-starred venture of the siege tower. Surrounded by his captains, Clooney was led down to the safety of the ditch. Apparently unaware of anything about him, he muttered dark words to himself, strange things that others could not comprehend. Behind the warlock back, the captains looked at each other in a puzzled fashion. Had the mind of Clooney the Scourge snapped? The fire had dwindled to smoldering embers by the next morning. Constance and the abbot looked at the results from the ramparts. A wide area of the meadowland was burned black and scorched flat. Even now, parts of it sizzled in the morning dew. "Thank goodness it did not spread to the woods," said the abbot. "Otherwise all of Mossflower might have gone up in flames." The badger stared sadly at the scorched earth. "True. No side uses fire as a weapon, not even Clooney. It is the one thing that spells certain deaths to creatures on both sides. We must look on as an accident, Father Abbot." "Accident or not, we owe Cornflower a debt of gratitude," replied the abbot. "She is a very brave young field mouse. Both for her swift action we would all have been under the heel of the tyrant today." In the abbey kitchens, Cornflower stirred the oatmeal and checked on the baked bread in the oven. She smiled to herself. What would Matthias think of it all? Last night's heroine, this morning's cook. Hold on 1 second, because we're about to go on to chapter 6. Chapter 6. While Logolog held the rock from closing, Matthias peered into the hole. It was a long, dark tunnel sloping down the side of the quarry stone. There was neither sight nor sound of Gaussum. They called her name in loud whispers, not wanting to shout for fear of disturbing the snake. Matthias became impatient. "Come on, Logolog! We'll have to go in there. Be as quiet as you can." "Wait a tick," the shrew replied. Taking a small boulder, he jammed the entrance slab from swinging shut. "I'm ready now. Lead on, Matthias." They ventured cautiously into the long, sloping passage, digging in their heels to prevent themselves sliding right down as Gaussum probably had done. On reaching the bottom, they stood a while to let their eyes become accustomed to the gloom. The floor leveled out. The tunnel was high and broad enough to allow them to walk side by side without stooping. As they walked further, Logolog pointed at strange symbols and weird signs that had been scraped into the surface of the soft stone. Though the quarry tunnels were natural, they had obviously been the lairs of generations of serpents. Most of the signs were of a reptilian nature. The friends pressed onwards until the passage broadened out into a small chamber with 2 or more tunnels leading from it. "You take the left, and I'll take the right," Matthias whispered. "Make an arrow on the wall with your sword at intervals. I'll do the same with my dagger. They say this way we won't get lost. Should you find Asmodeus, come straight back to this chamber. If he finds you, then the best thing to do is run as fast as you can and shout like mad." "Take care, warrior. I'll see you later," said Logolog. Gripping his dagger in readiness, Matthias crept into the right-hand tunnel. It was slightly narrower than the first, but just as high. The walls were yellow stone, so soft that it was almost like damp sand. Scarcely daring to breathe, and glad that his feet made no sound on the sandy floor, Matthias went ahead, remembering to mark an arrow every few yards. From somewhere up ahead, the young mouse could hear the sound of dripping water. The musical echoing plops made an eerie noise in the sinister stillness of the passage. His paw encountered a space in the left wall. It turned out to be a rectangular anteroom. Matthias was horrified to discover that it was full of cast-off snake skins. They lay about on the floor, dry and withered. He shuddered at the thought of their former occupants, the hairs rising on the nape of his neck as he swiftly abandoned the repulsive scene and hurried along the passage. It was more than twice as long as the entrance tunnel. As Matthias cut another arrow into the wall, he noticed that the carved symbols looked older, more primitive. This place had been a serpent's den long before it had been a quarry. The passage ended abruptly. Matthias walked out into an immense cavern. Great hall of Redwall would have fit into a quarter of this colossal structure. At its center was a vast shimmering lake that glowed with a pale phosphorescent light. The droplets of water came from somewhere high up in the dark recesses of the roof. They dripped steadily down and broke the surface of the subterranean lake, causing a continuous ripple. Matthias noticed that there were numerous other caverns and tunnels leading from this large cave. Asmodeus! The sound froze the very blood in his veins. The adder was close by, where he could not tell. The deadly hiss echoed all around him. Asmodeus! Matthias bravely tried to quell the panic that welled up inside him. If the snake knew where he was, he wouldn't waste his time trying to scare him, he reasoned. He would have got me by now. Feeling slightly reassured, but still very uneasy. Excuse me. Matthias circled the pool, trying hard to ignore the loathsome hissing sound. Asmodeus. Summoning up his courage, he stole silently into the nearest cave. In the glow that reflected from the pool, Matthias saw a sight that gladdened his heart. There was Gaussum, seated with her back against the wall. Matthias ran across and seized the gorilla shrew by her paw. "Gaussum, how did you get in here, you little nuisance? We've been so—" Gaussum toppled on her side, dead. With a strangled sob, the young mouse recoiled. He could see the poison fang marks clearly upon the shrew's chest. Gaussum's face was bloated, the eyes screwed shut, the lips blackened. Asmodeus! Matthias stumbled from the gruesome death larder of the adder out into the main cavern. He sat for a while, shuddering with horror for what he had seen, hardly believing that the still body had been a warm, living, breathing creature not long ago. Forcing himself to rise and carry on, Matthias continued his explorations. The next entrance was a tiny hole in the wall, scarcely worth bothering about. Nevertheless, he decided to investigate it. Crouching on all fours, Matthias forced his way into the hole, which proved to be another tunnel. He began forcing his way along its narrow length. Asmodeus! The dreadful sound was much closer now. Struggling and pushing forward, he came to the end of the tunnel. Suddenly Matthias was face to face with the giant adder. Asmodeus. The huge reptile was sleeping. With every breath it expelled, the snake's tongue flickered out, repeating the vile name. Asmodeus. Matthias stared in mute fascination. The snake's eyes were not shut, but filmed over in sleep. It was breathing slowly and regularly. The huge, muscular, scaly body was coiled in no recognizable pattern. At odd intervals, the immense coils would shift lazily with a dry, scaly rustle. The head, however, remained fixed in the same position. Across the jumble of banded coils, Matthias thought he could catch a glimpse of the tapering tail. There were other things in the lair of the snake. A fox's tail, wood-pigeon wings, the head of a big fish, and fur pelts of many species of creatures. But Matthias saw only the sword of Martin the Warrior. It hung from the fork of a tree root at the back of the viper's den. A large red pommel stone was set into the top of the hilt. The handle was of black leather and silver to match the belt and scabbard. Below a heavy silver crosspiece was the blade. Made from the finest steel, its double edges tapered to a ruthlessly sharp tip. Down the center of the blade ran a blood channel, either side of which there were symbols which Matthias could not make out. This was truly the sword of Redwall Abbey. It was his duty to get it. Matthias moved more stealthily than he had ever done in all his life. Inch by a careful inch, paw by whisker, slowly, painstakingly trying to make his body as small as possible. He flattened himself against the wall to get by the huge, spade-like head. The tongue almost slithered across his face as it slid in and out, constantly repeating the dreadful name, Asmodeus. He felt the adder breathing, his cold exhalations carrying the sweet musty odor of death, steering his whiskers. A coil moved and faintly touched his leg. Matthias sucked in his breath and squeezed closer to the wall. The snake blinked, sending the opaque tissue upwards. The young mouse was confronted by the wide-open eye of the monster staring directly at him. Asmodeus. The eye filmed over again as the snake carried on with whatever evil vision it was dreaming. Sweet like ice water drenched Matthias's fur. Sweat. Asmodeus had opened his eye while still remaining asleep. There was no explanation possible. The moments of suspense ticked on for what seemed ages until Matthias squeezed past the serpent's head. Avoiding the giant coils, he walked quickly and quietly over to where the sword hung from the tree roots on the cave wall. Matthias lifted the ancient sword down. Reverently, he placed both paws around the handle. Tighter and tighter, he gripped it until the point lifted from the floor, and the bright blade stood out level in front of him. He sensed how Martin must have felt each time he had held this beautiful weapon. The young mouse knew that he had been born for this moment, his grip causing the tremor of the steel to run through his entire body. It was a part of him. Matthias's main concern was to get safely away with the sword. In the confined space of the snake's den, there was no room to wield the fabled blade. If he struck at Matthias, he would be crushed to death against the walls by the powerful lashing coils of the adder in its death throes. Nothing would be accomplished by such a foolhardy action. Like a seasoned fighter, the young mouse chose to nominate the time and place of combat. He looked around the den. The hole he had come through was obviously too small for the adder to have used for the same purpose. It served as a breathing hole for Asmodeus, also as an application to echo the dreaded name through the halls and tunnels as a warning to intruders. Near the snake's tail, which lay directly across his path, he saw the skins and pelts of the cave wall tremble slightly. They were covering the only possible entrance and exit for a reptile such enormous girth. Emboldened by his ownership of Martin's weapon, Matthias ticked the tail lightly with the sword point. It had the desired effect. The long-scaled, encrusted coils rippled as the serpent changed position in his sleep. Speedily, he slipped through the certain curtain of skins from the passage. It curled into a crescent-shaped arch, bringing Matthias back into the main cavern with its luminous lake. Logalaw came dashing, pale-faced out of the cave that contained Gaussum's body. Eyes wide with terror, he ran straight into the paws of his mouse friend, narrowly missing injury on the sword blade. Before he could be silenced, he yelled out in a panic-stricken shout, "Matthias, Galsum is dead! I've just seen her in that cave! She's dead! Galsum is dead!" In his den down the tunnel, Asmodeus came awake. And that is where we will end for tonight. We are at the halfway point, y'all, of part 3, and literally, there's only 14 chapters in part 3. Excuse me, 15 chapters. So we're at chapter 7. We'll read 3 more chapters tomorrow night, and we're getting there, y'all. We are gonna breeze through this. I am determined to do it. But, as always, love y'all so very much. I'll see y'all later. Have a great night, y'all.